Inheriting my grandparents' home was bittersweet. After 5 years of caring for them in their final years, the house became more than a structure of walls and windows. It was a sanctuary, a living testament to their lives and the love they poured into raising me. But the peaceful life I envisioned there was quickly overshadowed by a storm I never anticipated. My sister, Amy, a 28-year-old influencer, decided that the inheritance was hers to contest. And as she launched a social media crusade against me, I found myself torn between honoring my grandparents' wishes and withstanding an onslaught of harassment, all because Amy believed the world owed her a luxury she never lifted a finger to earn. To understand the depths of betrayal, you'd need to know our family history. I'm 32, and Amy is 4 years younger. Our parents divorced when I was 12, and it was a messy, emotionally charged split. My dad left to live with his secretary, and despite his indiscretions, Amy chose to live with him, idolizing him even after he betrayed our family. Meanwhile, I stayed with my mother, who, though devastated by the divorce, did her best to provide for us. But between her two jobs, she could hardly manage the emotional and physical demands alone. That's when my grandparents stepped in. They were the bedrock of my childhood. Weekends, holidays, and any time Mom needed help, I would spend at their beautiful Victorian house, a cozy relic of a past era with its sprawling garden, stained glass windows, and a warmth that only came from decades of laughter, love, and family gatherings. Grandpa was a retired chef, a man of passion and culinary wisdom who poured every ounce of his love for food into teaching me his secrets. He taught me how to cook, from the basics of chopping onions to the artistry of perfecting a roast. We would spend hours together in the kitchen, tasting, adjusting, and savoring each dish. Grandma, meanwhile, was a quiet soul who adored her garden. She taught me the patience it took to grow roses and the tenderness required to cultivate something beautiful. Her garden became my refuge, a place of peace where we connected without needing words. Amy, on the other hand, treated our grandparents' house more like a hotel. She would pop in only when she needed money or a place to crash after a night out. She had a way with them, an ability to bring tears to her eyes and a quiver to her voice that never failed to convince them she was struggling. I would watch in silent frustration as Grandma would reluctantly hand over cash for school supplies, only to later hear that Amy spent it on clothes, makeup, or whatever else caught her eye. For Amy, everything and everyone was an asset to leverage. She rarely saw Grandma and Grandpa as the people who would have given her the world, just as convenient resources. Years passed, and while I found stability in a career as an accountant, Amy was pursuing a life of curated luxury online. She had dropped out of college after one semester to become a model, diving headfirst into the world of social media influencers. But her glamorous posts were smoke and mirrors. She'd borrow designer clothes, pose in fancy hotel lobbies, and return everything once she got her photos. She was projecting an image of wealth and privilege while couch surfing at friends' places and asking family for money to fund her next opportunity. Then, 5 years ago, everything changed. Grandpa suffered a severe stroke, and Grandma called me in a panic. I was at work, but I left immediately to take them to the hospital. Amy, of course, didn't answer any of our calls. That night, she posted from a nightclub, partying while her family was in crisis. It was the first time I saw how deep the chasm was between us, but I still hoped she would step up, even just a little, for our grandparents. After Grandpa's stroke, it became clear that he would need constant care. Grandma, already worn from age and grief, couldn't manage on her own, and hiring full-time help was financially out of reach. Without hesitation, I made the decision to move in with them. My company allowed me to work remotely, so I converted their dining room into my bedroom and office. Each day fell into a rhythm centered around Grandpa's needs. I was his nurse, chef, and companion all in one. Those years were demanding but also profoundly fulfilling. I was giving back to the people who had raised me, and in many ways, I felt closer to them than ever. Amy, however, visited only 3 times during those 5 years. The first visit lasted no more than 20 minutes. She claimed that the sight of medical equipment depressed her, and after a forced hello and a quick photo of herself beside Grandpa, she left. The second visit came months later. This time, she asked for money, spinning a story about a promising modeling opportunity in Miami. Grandma, who didn't have that kind of money to give, managed to offer half of what Amy requested. Amy left in a huff, guilt-tripping her by saying she never asked for anything, which was far from the truth. The third visit was a true display of her audacity. She came by for less than an hour, staged photos of herself spoon-feeding Grandpa, and later posted them online with captions like, "Family is everything," and "cherishing the moments." She was using our family's suffering as content. It disgusted me, but I bit my tongue, hoping one day she'd realize how selfish and exploitative she was being. As time passed, Grandpa's health declined, and we eventually lost him. Amy didn't even come to the funeral, claiming she had a major shoot. Her social media, however, told a different story. She posted selfies at a pool party that day. Grandma was heartbroken, but she brushed it off, having grown used to Amy's indifference. Only 3 months after Grandpa's death, Grandma's own health took a turn. Losing him had drained her spirit, and without her lifelong partner, she just seemed to fade. She passed away quietly one winter night, and I was by her side, holding her hand. Amy showed up to Grandma's funeral, but not out of respect. She wore an inappropriate dress, took selfies by the casket, and left as soon as she'd secured enough content for her feed. As I stood there watching her parade her way through her photo session, something in me hardened. I realized that my relationship with her, whatever was left of it, would never be the same. After the service, our grandparents' will was read. In it, they left their house to me, a Victorian home with a legacy of love and memories that meant the world to me. They left Amy $50,000, a sum that was more than fair given her lack of involvement and outright neglect. Their lawyer explained that they had intentionally left me the house in recognition of the years I'd spent caring for them. For the first time, I felt seen by them even after they were gone. It was their way of telling me they understood what I had sacrificed. Amy, on the other hand, was furious. She launched into a fit, claiming I had manipulated them. She conveniently forgot how she'd been given the same opportunity to live with them and help care for them, but had turned it down because it would interfere with her career. Still, she painted herself as a victim, telling our family members that Grandpa wasn't of sound mind when he changed the will after his stroke. She even tried to say I'd influenced him, which was laughable given how much documentation the lawyer had to prove otherwise. Then, last week, Amy showed up at my door unannounced, mascara smudged and tears streaming down her face. Her latest boyfriend had kicked her out after discovering she'd maxed out his credit cards. She wanted me to sell the house, claiming that family shares what they have. She was $40,000 in debt, she confessed, after buying fake designer clothes and paying for fraudulent modeling courses. She believed selling the house would solve all her problems, and then she could finally become a full-time influencer. When I suggested she get a regular job instead, she was horrified, as if I'd proposed something beneath her. When I refused to sell, she turned nasty, hurling insults and saying I was selfish for keeping the wealth all to myself. My patience, stretched thin from years of putting up with her antics, finally snapped. I told her that Grandma and Grandpa had left the house to me for a reason and that she needed to face the reality of her choices. She stormed out, but that was only the beginning. Within days, Amy had escalated the situation in ways I never could have imagined. She went online and crafted a sob story, telling her followers that her greedy sister had taken advantage of our grandparents and manipulated them out of their house. She shared a heavily edited video montage of her few visits to the house, staged with her posing next to Grandpa or holding Grandma's hand, and claimed she had been a devoted caregiver. She even spun a story about me isolating our grandparents and poisoning their minds against her. The post went viral. Hashtags like #JusticeForAmy and #FamilyBetrayal started trending. Her followers, most of whom were impressionable teenagers, believed every word and bombarded my social media accounts with hateful messages. They called me a monster, a gold digger, and accused me of elder abuse. I'd never seen anything like it. The harassment quickly spiraled out of control. Amy's followers began posting my personal information online, including my work address and LinkedIn profile. My office received a flood of emails and calls demanding that I be fired, claiming I was guilty of elder abuse and inheritance manipulation. Thankfully, my boss knew the truth. He remembered how supportive the company had been when I needed flexibility to care for Grandpa, but HR had to step in to manage the damage. They were bombarded with negative online reviews from strangers who knew nothing of my real relationship with my grandparents. Things took a dark turn when Amy managed to get some of our extended family involved. She called every relative she could think of, twisting the story to make herself look like the victim. Some family members believed her, while others, who knew my grandparents and had seen Amy's manipulative ways, sided with me. Even still, the family tension became exhausting. Cousins who had once looked up to me began avoiding my calls, and the holidays, which were already painful without my grandparents, became unbearable. The final straw came when Amy moved in with our mother. Mom had always been an enabler, always bending over backward to keep the peace, and now she was allowing Amy to take over her life. Quite literally. Amy turned Mom's modest apartment into her personal content studio, rearranging furniture, setting up ring lights, and hosting influencer friends for so-called content creation days, which quickly devolved into noisy parties. Mom's apartment, once a cozy and familiar space, became unrecognizable. When Amy's antics led to Mom's electricity bill skyrocketing, I offered to help Mom financially, on the condition that she set boundaries with Amy. But Mom wouldn't. Family is family, she said, even as she looked miserable in her own home. In her eyes, Amy could do no wrong, and I was somehow to blame for the entire situation. I made one last attempt to help Amy find a way out of her downward spiral. I met her for coffee and tried to talk to her about real-world solutions, like getting a steady job, starting fresh, and paying off her debts. A friend of mine had a few entry-level marketing positions open, and I thought Amy might thrive with a structured environment. But she wasn't interested. In fact, she recorded our conversation without my knowledge, spliced the audio to make it sound like I was belittling her, and posted it online with captions like, "My toxic sister tries to ruin my career." The last piece of heartbreak came when I found out that Amy had contacted my ex-boyfriend, James, asking him to expose me for who I really was. I hadn't spoken to James in years, not since he cheated on me, but he was decent enough to forward me the messages. Amy had shamelessly asked him for any dirt on me, even suggesting they collaborate on a social media takedown. Seeing her stoop that low hurt, but it also strengthened my resolve to finally put an end to her manipulation. Then came Amy's attempt to legally challenge my inheritance. A letter arrived from her lawyer claiming she was entitled to half the house's value because she had been a co-caretaker for our grandparents. Her evidence was laughable: a few staged photos from her Instagram, grocery receipts from times she'd visited, and a handful of greeting cards where Grandma wrote, "We love you both." This was beyond anything I could have anticipated. I was livid, but I also knew this lawsuit could drag on and become incredibly costly. That's when, while going through Grandma's things for evidence, I found the diary. Tucked away in an old drawer was Grandma's handwritten account of the years we spent together, and more painfully, of Amy's betrayals. Each entry broke my heart. Grandma wrote about how Amy had repeatedly manipulated them, taking thousands of dollars by pretending she was on the brink of success. One entry described how Amy had taken Grandma's beloved diamond necklace, a family heirloom meant to be passed down to me, and sold it to cover credit card debt. Armed with the diary and all its damning evidence, I took it to my lawyer. Amy's legal claim crumbled when her own lawyer saw the documentation, including video recordings of Grandpa stating his wishes in the presence of a notary. A handwriting expert verified that Grandma's diary was genuine. When Amy's side tried to argue the diary was fabricated, she quickly backtracked, claiming instead that the entries proved Grandma was mentally unwell. The sheer audacity was staggering, but her followers began to see the contradictions in her story. Comments turned from support to skepticism, and slowly, the tide began to turn. Despite the dismissal of her lawsuit, Amy wasn't done. She turned to social media again, trying to rally her remaining followers by casting herself as a victim of family betrayal. But by this point, her following had shrunk, and her pleas for sympathy fell on deaf ears. Most people saw her for who she was, a manipulative person who had preyed on her family for years. In the midst of all this, Mom was still standing by Amy, pleading with me to keep the peace and to consider selling the house for the family. She couldn't see that the house wasn't just property to me. It was a place filled with memories, where I had cared for our grandparents and shared some of the most meaningful years of my life with them. I had sacrificed to honor their legacy, and I wasn't going to sell out now. Months passed, and things finally began to calm down. I cut all contact with Amy and Mom, focusing on restoring the house and preserving my grandparents' legacy. I planted a garden in the backyard, mirroring the one Grandma had nurtured, and started cooking Grandpa's recipes every Sunday. It became a way to honor them and find solace in the life I had chosen. In the end, Amy's social media influence faded. Her remaining followers dwindled when she couldn't maintain the luxurious facade, and her reputation was irreparably damaged. Even her close friends began to distance themselves as more of her deceit came to light. Rumor had it, She moved out of mom's place and tried starting fresh in another city, but with her credit destroyed and her reputation in ruins, it wouldn't be easy. As for me, I have found a sense of peace. The house remains mine, and each corner of it is a reminder of love, family, and resilience. I have reconnected with relatives who distanced themselves during the drama, and together, we celebrate the values Grandma and Grandpa instilled in us: honesty, kindness, and hard work. This experience taught me that family is about more than blood. It's about respect, support, and mutual care. I may have lost a sister in the process, but I gained clarity and the freedom to live my life without the toxic influence she once held over me. The house is no longer just a symbol of inheritance. It's a testament to the love that truly defines family.